David Edward and Teri Brown discuss Teri's new book, Sunflowers Beneath the Snow.
Teri, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us here on our podcast.
I'm really excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. I'm actually very excited to have you because you have written a book. I usually say, hey, so you've written a book, but you've not just written a book. You have written a book. You have written a book.
Yeah, it is rather timely. I come out with a book about Ukraine just as Russia invades Ukraine. I think that's pretty incredible.
It's pretty incredible. And not only that, but your book is about when this happened before. So history is almost repeating itself on some level.
Itself, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, I tell people all the time that it's a historical fiction ripped from the headlines.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And
So,
how long? And this just came out, right? It's only been out. How long has it been out?
January 25th was the launch date.
Okay. So about what's that? 3 months, 2.5 months as we sit here recording this.
Right.
Of course, this video will be saved for posterity. So
of course.
Now they have a date and they can figure out exactly when we recorded this.
Good.
Right. So what is your book called?
So it's Sunflowers Beneath the Snow.
Okay.
And it's a historical fiction. Yeah.
What's it about?
So it's about 3 generations of Ukrainian women, and it begins with a rebel. He doesn't want Ukraine to be part of the Soviet Union, and in the 1970s there was a bit of a rebellion that was going on. He's part of that. He gets compromised and he's whisked out of the country. But when he leaves his wife and daughter behind. And so we follow his wife, his daughter, and eventually his granddaughter through these generations. And so it's like throughout the rest of the Soviet, when they're, over Ukraine, then Ukrainian independence, and then much further in. And then finally, when Russia comes back and invades again in 2014 when they go into the Crimean Peninsula. So it's kind of that whole thing. And it's more about the women and their stories and how they live in these times that are very difficult.
Right. So the last invasion was 2014, and now we just had another one here in 2022. So do you think history is repeating itself a little bit? I mean, do you think the stories you tell are happening again?
Yeah. And so it's interesting. There's a character in my story. His name is Danya, and he hates Russians, and he hates them in a way that's like far too severe. Like instead of disliking the Russian government or whatever. So, he's overboard, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to have that feeling in there. But one of the things that he says is essentially Russians were, are, and always will be what they are. And so it's kind of interesting that in the story, of course, he said, they wanted power before and they're going to take it. And then 2014 happened. Right. And then he says, and they'll always be that way. And now it's happening again in 2022. So, part of me did not want it happening. Like I kept thinking, no, don't do this. Don't do this. But I think part of me kind of knew that it would.
Right. Right.
Not necessarily while I was releasing my book, mind you, but I think that I knew that they weren't going to stop with the Crimean Peninsula. They were going to push more because that seems to be, at least governmentally, what they're about. That's what they do. So,
well, and in real estate, they say location, location, location. But with a book like this, we could say timing. Because you've got kind of a hit here, I think, if I understand what I'm looking at when I look at the book. Is that right?
Well, it's picking up steam. I'm a debut author. Nobody knows who I am. They've never heard of me before. I didn't have any kind of following. I didn't have any kind of platform. I didn't know how to market. I knew nothing. I mean, I got started essentially, I had this book idea. I wrote it. It got picked up. They sent me out with a launch date, and it launched. And I sat there thinking, well, I have to do something now to get, I didn't know what I was doing. So given where it started and what it's currently doing, I feel like it's really making a lot of progress. It's by no means, it's not a New York Times bestseller yet, but I'm going to put yet on there. I'd love to see that happen.
Well, I know a little bit about, you and I, we went, I was where you were. Now, I didn't have a book like this that was as timely. But my first book just came out a year ago, February. So about, what's that, 14 months. Now, since then, I've written like 40 books because I'm doing this, but I had nowhere near, I didn't step into the market the way you stepped in the market. I'm looking, I have the Amazon numbers over here. I mean, honestly, for a debut author, this thing's doing pretty good.
Like I said, it's not, I like instantaneous success. So it's a little hard for me to say, wow, it's not like, number one already. But on the other hand, I know a lot of people who are in my shoes, who are new authors, who don't have, I currently have 77 Amazon reviews, which really is amazing, given that I had no idea even how to go about getting that to happen. So yeah, I'm feeling pretty good about it. Like I said, I like instantaneous success, and that's just not the way books do. And so I'm having to learn to be patient. It's not one of my strong suits.
Well, which is probably, so let's get into it a little bit. So what was it? So there was a morning before and a morning after. So there was a morning before you decided to write this book, and then there was the morning of. So walk us through, what was that? You had, at some point you had an idea to do this. And what was it like that day when you woke up and you said, today's the day I'm writing this thing? What was that process like?
Okay, so I got the idea because the youngest, the granddaughter in the book is loosely based off of someone I know who told me this incredible little teeny tiny sliver of a story. And that sliver of a story was so compelling to me that I wrote 82,000 words of fiction so that I could have that ending. Right.
Right.
But that was in 2016, and I had not written fiction. I had only written nonfiction for companies and, business articles and things. And I really didn't believe in myself at all. I didn't think I could write it. I felt that it should be written, but I never felt it was going to be me. I got out of a really bad relationship in 2017, and I started writing fiction. And in 2018, I got an opportunity to be at a writer's retreat for 2 weeks. And at this retreat, they had nothing that you had to do. They gave you a room and a desk and a bed and a kitchen that you could cook in, and space and time. And so I wrote 50,000 words of that novel, start to finish. I had the whole thing. Of course, then I went back and added a lot more. But I mean, I sat down and essentially let that dump out of my head and got that written down and realized, wow, this is really a story. Like I really did write it. Like I really got this thing written. But that was in 2018, and it took me another 2 years to get the guts to start sending it out to anyone.
Right. Interesting.
So yeah.
So you wrote, and would you consider that the 50,000 words, was that your first draft, do you think? Is that what you would call it?
Yeah, I definitely call it a first draft. I actually call my process word vomit, which is I have this, I just have this idea in my head, and I have characters that are screaming and they want their story to be told. And I just start writing, and I don't worry a whole lot about, is it really readable, and am I showing or not telling, or am I getting the words mixed up, and am I using too many cliches? I just don't worry about any of that. I get the story out of my head so that I can then concentrate on all those other things that makes the story a good story versus just a story. But if it's stuck in my head, then it's just going round and round and round and round and round, and I can't get anything else done. And so I kind of like get it out, then I let it sit for a while, and then I pick it back up and I think, well, that's trash. And I sit down and then I start making it into something that makes more sense. So
trash or gold. I'm sure there was a little bit of gold in there.
Oh yeah, no, but I meant there was no way you could turn it into anyone at that stage.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you wrote the first draft in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Now, it was a marathon. I mean, that's a very specific scenario you created for yourself. How did you know to do that?
How did I know to do
to go to a writer's retreat and to,
So I had been to this writer's retreat in the past. It was how I wrote the first thing I ever wrote. I've found that for me, I have a lot of trouble. This is my office. I can write for short periods of time in here, but I can't really get into writing. And the office is exactly like I love. It's yellow, which I love. It's got pictures of the ocean all around, which I love. The sunshine comes in the window, but it's at home, and I have a dog and a husband and the mail that comes, and laundry and food and grocery shopping, and I can't settle in. So I have found that for me, if I'm not going to go settle into a retreat, then if I'm going to write for the day, it's better for me to go somewhere else. I'm better off in a coffee shop than I am in this office. Mm-hmm. Because in the coffee shop, sure, there's lots of stuff going on, but it isn't about me. Mm-hmm. And here it is. Yeah.
Totally get it. No, so, I'm the same way. I'm very, very, very lucky. We, the house I'm in had a separate mother-in-law suite, I guess they call it, but it's got a door and you have to go outside to get to it. So I'm the same way. When I write, I don't even I have to have absolute silence, and I just think and I write. And I write a couple hours a day, most days. But I think so when you went to what preparation did you do for the writer's retreat? I mean, did you have an outline, notes? I mean, what was that, when you walked in to do this?
Yeah. I had done a little bit of research, very what I call broad research. I understood the basics of the Ukrainian history in terms of like the whole Russia relationship. I had created an outline of history. I don't do an outline of my book, but it was an outline of history to kind of give me, like if I had gotten my character to 1990, I kind of knew what that meant in terms of the history of the space. And that's about what I had done. I didn't even really get into really deep because I didn't really know where the story was going to take me. I had a idea of where to start, and I knew where I was going to end because that was that little sliver of truth that I wanted to get to. And then everything else was like, let's see where the characters take me.
I find that fascinating. That's close to what I do. I write kind of historical thrillers, but I'm writing the last book in a series I'm writing takes place during the invasion of Panama. And I did what you just said, which is I don't outline the story at all. I kind of know the beginning and the end and all that. Yeah. But I went through and I said, okay, let me just bullet point the year leading up to the invasion. So I kind of know the beats of what's going on in the world, so that my completely fictitious story aligns to what was the external factors that were going on. So I find that interesting. So that is kind of amazing. What was the process to get from the 50,000 words then when you were no longer at the writer's retreat to an actual book that's on Amazon?
So I did I created a retreat for myself. My mom went away on vacation and I asked if I could use her house. And so I went in and used her house for 5 days and kind of went through looking at like what's missing. There's obviously things missing. It's only 50,000 words. That's not long enough. It's got to be longer. What's missing? So I went in and added a lot of that. Then that's probably really what I did on that particular trip was I added and got a lot more words so that it filled out. And then you have to go back and do all of that other editing stuff. So at that point, I did let an editor see it. And then they gave me a lot of ideas in terms of I use the same words over and over. Yeah, I use weak words. Yeah. How many times can you say big? It's just, that's not a good word. And it's like, yeah, I know, but it's the only one that was coming to my mind when I was writing. So I kind of had to go back through and get rid of all of that low level writing stuff that makes your writing weak instead of really strong.
Right. Fascinating. What prompted the decision to get an editor? Did you try and self-edit it first and then just
I did a little bit of self-editing. I use a program. I'm not going to even be able to remember the name of it now. It was on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, I use a program. And so I had used that to kind of give me a feel for like too many of this word or too many of that. But the reason I got an editor is I know I'm a debut author. And I'm sure, I don't know what I'm doing. I felt very strongly that I needed someone who had way more experience than I did to help me put my book so that it was, instead of one that was going to be rejected over and over, might have a chance at seeing a little bit of success. Yeah. And I'm a firm believer in, everybody can learn something from someone, and there's no reason to do this whole thing alone. Yeah, editing yourself is a good idea, but there's nothing wrong with getting someone else to take a look at it and help you see what else needs to be done here. That second set of eyes, I think, is a very valuable resource.
Yeah, I would make it even stronger statement. I think that, especially as a debut author, but look, I've written like 20 books, and I have an editor. I work with her, and she's just part of my process, because your brain tricks you, especially if you're too close to when you wrote it, and it fills in gaps, and it changes the word for to from, and it doesn't notice that you use the word big 900 times in a row. It just, so you either have to step away from it and come back, which is possible, but I don't recommend it. But no, getting the editor is, and I think,
and the editor was able to help me see, I had a character that I had not developed enough, and I felt it was developed enough. I was fine, but it's because I live in my own head, and I knew a lot about the character that I hadn't written down, but I knew.
Right.
And when I read it, I was fine with it because I knew that character. I knew it because I'd written it. Right. But when my editor looked at it, she said, "So I want to know a lot more about this character." And it's like, why? But I listened to what she had to say, and I developed that character more, and it made the book a lot stronger. Right. And so I think those are the kinds of things your editor can help you see. I'm horrible using cliches. I use them. I don't even recognize I've done it. And she actually pointed out several in the first 20 pages and then said, "So you need to go back through and start looking for these yourself."
Right.
And I was like, right. Okie dokie. Thank you so much for that. Because that's what I do. I think in cliches, I talk in cliches, I write in them, and then that's not really what you want to do.
Right. Well, and some cliches, a few cliches are fine. I mean, they're cliches for a reason, but it can't be. It can't be, the story can't be one giant string of cliches. So
exactly. And the other thing is a lot of times I read a book recently and I liked the book, but several times I felt jerked out of the story, and it was a cliche that did it, because it wasn't quite right. It felt too canned or contrived or whatever, and it kind of like jerked me out. And then I would get back into the story, and then maybe another one would jerk me out. And I realized that's why you can't use them a lot.
Right.
You can, if there's a conversation going on and you have a particular character and they're likely to say something like that, well, that's great. But you can't use it over and over and over, because it takes people out of the story.
Well, and I have bad news for you, which is you're entering a world now with your writing where it's going to be more and more difficult to read other people's books, because
I know
it's a weird trade-off. It must be how, like, people that make movies or whatever, or musicians, it must be how they feel, because it's like, I've read all kinds of stuff that was all great. Now I've gone through that process so many times. I try and read stuff, and it's like, I can't do it. I don't think it doesn't mean it's bad. It's just, I can't do that thing where you're into the story. No, not every book, but many books, because.
So one of the things that I'm doing to combat that is I read something that is not my genre at all.
Okay.
And I know that the reason for the book is just for me to enjoy it. And I go in with the attitude of, as long as it's kind of like following along the way I expect it to, and it's all happy and sweet, I just go ahead and read it and I enjoy it. If it is my genre, I tend to be picking it apart in my head, not because I'm trying to pick apart the author, but I'm trying to learn what I need to do or don't need to do, or how did they twist that, or how did they do that, or wait a minute, that was foreshadowed back there. Let me go back and read that part again. And so it's a different, now I'm reading historical fiction for my own education. Yeah. And then I just read other things for, Teri wants to read a good book. So
right. Well, and as you're writing, you're slowly programming yourself to look at things a certain way. So that's a lot subconscious. So now when you read someone else's book, your subconscious is still doing it. So it can, and it can, and it can be back there going, hey, look at this, be careful. Your process was a little interesting, but did you ever, during the writer's retreat or after, did you ever get stuck, or did you look at the 50,000 word thing you came away with and you're just like, it's too much. I can't get it over the finish line? Or did you ever go through any of that?
Not on this
No?
one. It
Okay.
seemed to kind of write itself.
Mhm.
Like, I really feel it's crazy, but I feel like it was meant to be written, and it was meant to be written now,
I think so.
and
Yeah.
something just pushed me to keep going with it, and it kept falling into place. I don't think that will always be the case. I'm sure there's going to be times where I get really stuck. I have a couple of manuscripts that are about 2/3 done that I've never been able to go anywhere else with. They just kind of peter out, and I don't know what's supposed to happen with them. But this one didn't do that.
This one. Yeah. This one. Okay.
Yeah.
So the book's out now.
Mhm.
What has surprised you the most about its reception?
Well, the timing. I mean, I would say that the
Yeah, no,
timing is the thing that is the most crazy. Um, and then as a debut author, I don't know how other people feel, but it's my baby, right? I mean, these are my characters. This is my baby. I put my heart and soul into this thing, and I want to give it to people to read. And on the other hand, I don't want anyone to touch it, because if they don't like it, that's my baby. You can't not like my baby. So you kind of hand the book over at the same time going, now be very good with it. Make sure that you feed it at the right time. I mean, it's really it was very difficult for me. And it was easier to give it to people I didn't know than to people I did know, because I didn't want someone that I knew and loved and cared about to say anything about my book that might hurt my feelings.
I mean, look, we look, we're having the same experience. You're having a lot more success than I had. Well, my first book, I was the same way. And I got my first 1-star review, and this guy wrote like a page, and it was just, I mean, it was really hurtful.
It's devastating.
It was really devastating.
Yeah.
It really was. Now, I've now done it so much. I don't want to say I've developed a callus to it. But I understand more that the better the book is, that's not the right way to put it, but the wider the distribution of the book is, the more varied opinions you're going to get. And I'll also let you onto a secret. There is a class of wonderful people out there that I'm sure are just the best people in the world, who consider themselves literary connoisseurs. And I actually have a review on one of my books. They say they give it 4 stars. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. And they said, I would have given it 5, but it's not War and Peace. I'm like, well, okay, fair enough. But they just, so that they, for them, like a 3-star review is like a good review. Now that's not on Amazon, the point of sale. That's not really the metric, but there's also another group of people that I don't know if maybe they've written a book or they're writing a book, but they view that they are so good, and they've gone through the process we just talked about, where they can pick up on the little things. And for some reason they think it's very important to let everyone know their negative opinion about books. So but you come to accept that, and it's just, now with your first, you have to get a couple books in, I think, because with your first book, and especially this book is so unique and your experience is so unique, it's going to be more impactful, I think, for you. But go ahead.
No, I've just decided that it's true. Not every book is for every person, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And so if someone doesn't like it, that's okay, because there are books that I don't like, and it doesn't mean they're bad books. It means that they're not for me.
Yeah.
That's okay.
I'll get a 2-star review, and it'll say, yeah, the book's probably pretty good for someone who likes thrillers, but I it's not really my genre. I'm like, why did you take it? What kind of effort did it take? Why is that important for you to write down? And then not really understanding that there's a person on the other side of that who put a lot of time and effort into producing.
Well, and if it's not your genre, then why did you buy it to read it?
Well, yeah,
and why are you? Yeah. So,
yeah.
But I try not to get myself too messed up by it. I mean, I still do. I check every day. I can't help myself. I'm always looking, always reading. And I've got a couple of ghost ones where they just give you stars and they don't say anything, and you're like, but why? Why did you say 3? Why is that?
Well,
why?
Now Teri, let's be fair. You have 1 3-star ghost review, and that is the lowest
on Amazon, and I have several on Goodreads.
Okay. Well, Goodreads is a whole other world. We can have a whole other podcast on that, because they're a full star and a half down. But yeah, you have 1 ghost 3-star review, and everything else is gushing about how good this book is, which is huge. That's it. It's impossible. What you've done is impossible. So I think you should feel very good about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. So we need to wrap this up. What advice would you have for the person out there who is where you were, in 2016 or 15, whenever you heard that, your story and
16. Yeah.
yeah, 16, and they're thinking, I think I got a book in me. What is your advice to them on what on how to write it and what they should do and that kind of stuff?
So I have 3 things that I tell everybody that says I think I'd like to write, and the first one is then do it. Don't sit around and wait. Don't wait for the right class or the right time or the right, now is the time, because you don't get better at writing by thinking about it. You only get better at writing by doing it. And so the first thing that you write is going to be no good. That's, I have a couple of manuscripts that I wrote first, and they'll never be released because they're not good. But that's what taught me different lessons about writing. So you can't learn until you've actually started doing it. And then the second thing is once you have done that a few times and you have a piece and you're thinking this might have some merit, show it to someone you trust and be willing to listen to what they have to say about ways to make it better. And then the third thing sounds like I'm telling you to ignore the second thing, which is don't listen to everyone who tells you what to do about your book, because there's more than one way to write. There's more than one type of reader. And so listen to what they have to say and try it. But if it doesn't work for you, it's okay. It's okay to say that piece of advice is not good for the way I write or for what I'm trying to do. And it's okay to put that to one side. So, listen to others, but also know when it's okay to just say, that's a great piece of advice, but not for me.
I think that's flawless. And I can see why your book is so good, because that's well said, succinct, and more insightful than maybe, you can understand on first hearing. I think that's brilliant advice. Well, look, Teri, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I appreciate you carving time out of your busy schedule to come on my podcast, and maybe I'll follow up with you in a couple months. Are you working on another book?
I am. I'm working on a book that's called An Enemy Like Me. Okay. It's a historical fiction set in World War II.
Nice. Yeah, I've always wanted to do a World War II book, but it requires research and effort and all that. So, well, look, I wish you the best of success with the book that's out. And then I tell everyone your best book is your next book. So, and if you can pull that off, then I think you will have made it. I think you'll be there. So
wonderful. Thank you.
We'll follow up, and I appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, Teri.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you for watching. Please consider hitting the subscribe button.